Happy Wednesday, everyone, and happy birthday, Sarah B. I hope you have a fantastic day today, and I hope you celebrate it any way you like that brings you joy. And I hope this adds to that joy. But before we get to that work set, let's talk about the warm-up. Warm-up, sumo good mornings, a sumo squat for 3 to 5. Dynamic triangle at 3 to 5 a side. Side lunge, 6 to 10 alternating reps. And a Kang Squat of 3 to 5. We're gonna hit that for 2 to 3 rounds. Really just firing up those legs and getting things kind of ready to go. Then we're gonna move down to this bottom piece, which is gonna be a single leg RDL for 3 a side. You can load that, not load it, it's up to you. We're really just trying to fire up that single leg work and get those hamstrings and glutes fired up. We're then gonna move into a dumbbell sumo deadlift high pull for 3 reps per side. And then you're gonna go into a dumbbell snatch plus overhead hold. So you'll do 3 per side with a 5-second hold in the overhead position. So in that receiving, you'll stand tall. Once you stand all the way up, you'll hold for 5 seconds and then continue on with the next rep. Just giving you a really good opportunity to work on some stability overhead to get that good overhead position. From there, plank lean, 3 directions for 3 reps. So you're gonna work that side forward motion to get that really good full shoulder kind of setup throughout that plank lean. So we'll talk about that setup in between your reps and your directions to get the most out of that movement. You're gonna take that down anywhere from 1 to 3 rounds, depending on what you need to do to get yourself warmed up. And then you're gonna move into perhaps a practice round to get yourself fired up for some lunges and move yourself into the work set. The work set today is 5 rounds of work. You're gonna do 10 alternating front rack lunges into 16 alternating Renegade rows, 10 alternating dumbbell snatch, and 16 V-ups. And we'll have some different options there for you on those. And you'll hit that for 5 rounds. It's pretty quick, I'm not gonna lie. It does kind of get you going after a while and it slows down in the later rounds. But the rounds don't take as long as we think they do in this work set. So have some fun with this. You can have different loading for the rack lunge, the Renegade Row, and the dumbbell snatch, depending what you have access to at home. You can experiment with a bunch of different stuff there as you like, but we'll have some different options and dumbbell placements for those movements. So before we get to that though, let's warm you up. Let's get you ready and fired up to take down this work set. Let's get those feet underneath of that body and we'll take those arms big and tall up overhead. We're just gonna clasp our fingers overhead, pressing those arms straight with a little reach for the side, and we'll come back through with a little reach, trying to get that length from the hip all the way to the arms. And we're gonna take it all the way down to the floor, touching those toes. We're gonna walk up those shins, coming back down, planting those hands on either side of the foot. We'll step her back into that lizard. And then we're gonna lower that back knee down, pressing the hip, and then we're gonna come back to center. We're gonna press the hip, back to center, and press the hip, back to center. Straightening out the back leg, we'll step back into our down dog, setting those shoulders really strong. We're gonna press and hold the heel, just to wake up the back portion of the body. Switching it over to the other side, nice solid positioning here. Come back to center into that lizard on the other side. So squaring at those hips, we're going to lower the back knee, gently press that hip, coming back through, pressing the hip, back through, and pressing the hip, and back through. Straightening out that leg, we'll step back into that down dog as we reach those hips nice and high. Press and hold one heel, and press and hold the other heel, and then come back into that nice plank position, nice and tight. Tiptoeing those feet up, we're gonna roll ourselves all the way up, big tall stretch. Clasping those fingers, big reach for length, and then reach for length, and then come back up, bring those hands down. Whew. Let's get you guys fired up. Now, if there's any extra little movement you need to take down, maybe some rotation work, maybe some more hip stuff, please take that time to take that down now. Pause that video and then move in with me here when I start moving through that lower half with a little bit of T-spine work thrown in there. So let's get you ready, let's get you prepped, fired up. We're going to start off our morning here with a nice solid sumo Squat. So a nice kind of combo movement. Now the sumo stance is a little bit wider, but we still need to have a stance that allows us to hit that good knee tracking the toe when we hit the squat. So I'm going to turn profile in my sumo stance. I'm going to stand nice and tall, nice and upright with my hips neutral, my ribs in. I'm going to pull those hips back with that soft knee position as I really find that nice hinge. From there, I'm going to stand up nice and tall, reset my mind, kind of focus, and pull those hips down towards my heels into that sumo squat. From there, I'll stand up nice and tall. I'll get myself ready for that next rep where I work the hinge. So we just have to really give ourselves a chance to kind of refocus into that hinge, into that squat pattern, and just take it back and forth nice and slow. So a couple things to think about with that sumo squat, just a slightly more aggressive knee out action, which will allow our knees to track the toes properly and not collapse in with the wider stance. Right after that combo, we're going to move back into that sumo stance, and we're going to move into our dynamic triangle. So we're going to give ourselves a chance to kind of work on that position as I get my toe pointing straight to the side, my other toe on the angle. I'm going to bring my hand to my thigh, reaching my hand to the ceiling, and I'm going to pull my hip back into that hip as I take my body down towards my foot. And I'm going to keep that arm reaching up to the ceiling the entire repetition. Now with this on the other side, you may find that both sides are not created equal in terms of range, or you may find a slightly more kind of challenged T-spine perhaps on one side. So just listening to your body, both sides, and allowing yourself to get that good flow for both sides of the body. I'm going to hit that up for 3 to 5 per side, nice and slow. From there, we're going to take our feet a little wider, but still able to open up our hips fully in this nice wide stance. So we should be leaning forward because we can't open up our hips. So we should really get that hip into a good solid position. Now with this stance, it's a little wider, but we're going to focus still on squat mechanics. So I'm going to draw my hip back and down towards my heel, keeping my body upright, my torso nice and square, and then I'm going to push through that leg, opening my hips fully, and then drawing the hip down on the opposite side. Listening to my posture per side, and only going as deep as I can maintain that tall, upright body. That is very, very important to keep in mind as we move through that body position side to side in that side lunge. All about squat mechanics, knee tracking toe, torso upright, nice smooth flow. We got 6 to 10 alternating reps there. We're going to bring it back together into that hinge and squat mechanic in our Kang Squat. So the Kang Squat is executed at a regular stance. So my feet are going to be in that regular squat stance, nice and tall, nice and centered to the hips, and you are going to draw the hips back into that hinge pattern, that good morning, and then we're going to pull the hips towards the heels, keeping that chest up nice and tall, working on that good squat. Then we're going to lengthen out those hamstrings as I find that hinge pattern, and stand up, opening up those hips nice and fully. I like to pause in each position for a brief moment, just so I can get the benefits and feel the positioning and see how I'm feeling that day. So it really depends, and it does change day to day depending on what we've been doing leading into. So it's a really nice opportunity to see how you're feeling. Perhaps you have a little bit of limited range in the squat today. That should start to open up a little bit as we get those reps moving a little bit more so. So take your time with that Kang Squat. Don't rush through it. Really feel those positions in each of the hinge and the squat. As a quick recap, we have a sumo good morning to sumo squat, 3 to 5 reps. Dynamic triangle of 3 to 5 a side. Side lunge, 6 to 10 alternating reps. And finishing it off with a Kang Squat of 3 to 5 reps with those subtle pauses per position. 2 to 3 rounds, we'll just rock that really well. And then we're going to move into that next phase, which is going to start getting some dumbbell skill work in there as well. All right, we're on our last kind of phase of warm-up. This is kind of this mid-range piece. We're gonna practice some skill. We're gonna prime up our single leg, and we're gonna do that by starting off with a nice single leg RDL. So my feet are gonna be about hip width position. I'm gonna take that toe down into a kickstand so I can really focus on bringing those hips square to the front. So I'm showing my hip bones off to the front of the room. My hands gonna be holding onto a dumbbell with 2 hands or a single, depending on what side, or no load. So it depends on where you wanna be and where you're at for this warm up. I'm gonna draw my hips straight back into that nice hinge as I feel that hamstring say hello. And then I'm going to stand up nice and tall, opening up my hips to that neutral position. Drawing the hips back into that hinge. Nice sensation through the hamstring and the glute. And then I'm going to stand up nice and tall to really kind of fire those positions up. So I'm taking the time there to really find that good square hip, maybe adjusting every single rep to make sure those hips are square. If maybe coming up I start to open up a little bit or shift, I want to start that rep nice and square every time and try and keep that nice square hip. From there, we're going to move into a dumbbell sumo deadlift high pull. So I'm going to use a single dumbbell for this, and I'm going to get myself set up over top of that dumbbell like a deadlift. Now with that, the dumbbell will be between, and my deadlift setup can be from the floor or anywhere below the knee depending on where I can maintain my back position. That back position looks like so. My hips are going to be a little lower because the dumbbell's a little lower, my chest is a little high, my eyes are straight ahead. I'm going to push through those legs to open up those hips and knees to get some speed on the dumbbell. That would be my sumo deadlift. Now the sumo deadlift high pull, I'm going to build some speed and momentum on that dumbbell. I'm going to guide that dumbbell towards my sternum / drive that hand towards my armpit, which pulls that dumbbell to the outside portion of my chest and sternum. From the front, it looks like so. I push through the legs, get some speed on the dumbbell. My elbow goes back and up, and then back down to my hip. I'm not trying to hold the dumbbell up in that slightly kind of uncomfortable position, but it's just up and back down. If you start trying to hold the dumbbell here, it's going to put a lot of pressure on that shoulder. We don't really need to be there for what we're trying to achieve with this motion. Because in this motion, moving into the snatch, we want to think about the momentum on the dumbbell from those legs. So again, we build some speed on the dumbbell, we guide it to the sternum with that nice arm position, keeping it close to the body. Now once I've done 3 per side, I'm going to move into a dumbbell snatch, and I'm really just going to continue that momentum into that overhead position. So I'm going to turn it over, punching the ceiling into that good overhead position. It looks like so. I build speed on the dumbbell from the floor. I stand, and I'm going to push into that dumbbell and hold overhead for 5 seconds. Then I'll pull the dumbbell down, staying on the same side, find my floor position, and snatch. Keeping the dumbbell close, I'll stand tall, pushing into the dumbbell the whole time. 5-second hold, pull down, repeat for 3 reps, repeat on the opposite side. So I'm going to hold for 5 seconds on each repetition to work on some stability in the overhead, heat that shoulder up, and really just work on getting that good overhead position, really solidify into my work set today. So 3 snatches, 3 overhead holds, flip sides, do it again. From there, I'm going to go to the floor, and I'm going to work on that plank lean. So I'm going to get myself into my nice plank position, hands just outside my shoulders, pushing the floor away. I'm going to continue to push the floor away as I lean to one side, just to where I can tolerate. Pushing the floor away, I'll lean to the other side. I'll come back to center, and then setting up, I'm going to push the floor away, pull my hands towards my toes. So I'm trying to pull my hands back towards my leg, but the floor is going to stop me from moving my hands, and I'm just going to end up pulling my body forward. So I'm going to have to listen to my wrist and allow my body to come forward just where I feel comfortable, keeping those arms straight, and then press back into that nice plank position. I'd like you to give yourself a subtle pause before you move into the next rep, side to side, and before we pull forward, give yourself a subtle pause just to make sure your shoulders are set and they're ready for action. So that can be really beneficial to get the maximal kind of benefit from these movements in a 3-direction plank lean. From there, as a quick recap, we have a single leg RDL for 3 aside, dumbbell sumo deadlift high pull for 3, dumbbell snatch plus overhead hold for 3 and a 5-second hold overhead, plank lean 3 directions, side, side, forward, giving yourself those subtle pauses in each position and before we pull that body forward, very important. You'll hit that for 1 to 3 rounds, get yourself prepped. Then we're gonna move into the next phase, which is gonna be a little practice round of the movements we have in the workout to make sure we're comfortable with weight and the movements themselves. So pause the video, take that skill work down. We're gonna move you into that final push into that work set before we start the workout. We've made it to the work set, you guys. Here we go. Now this is your kind of primer before you actually tackle the 5 rounds of work. We haven't done any lunging yet, so we want to make sure we warm that lunge up to make sure we're happy with what we're going to take down. Now with the lunge today, it's a front rack lunge, so that'll be dumbbells up to the shoulder or a single dumbbell on one side, and then you'll flip it to the other side for your last 5 lunges. So you're going to split the workout per side, depending on what you have access to. If you're not comfortable with a front rack lunge, you can hold a goblet lunge, or you can do an unloaded lunge today and just work on the skill that is the lunge. Regardless of that, our posture of the lunge will stay the same. So you have the choice of going forward or backwards in this lunge. Now with this, I'm going to step my foot forward, lowering down towards the ground, keeping that back knee under the hip, under the shoulder, my front knee stacked nice and vertical over top of that front foot. And we're just gonna keep it nice and steady. So it'll be down, back up, down, back up. That would be 2 total count lunges. Now if I was going backwards, same rules apply. The only difference is I'm going to step back and down and stand. So it's a little bit easier to measure how far back I need to go to keep that shin vertical in the front, but sometimes it's a little harder for balance. So depending on how you feel comfortable with your lunging and what you're rocking today, kind of play with that and see how it goes. Now if lunging per se is not a comfortable movement for you in terms of the dynamic style, you can do a standing lunge as well. So what I'm going to do there is set myself up in a squat stance, step a foot forward, step a foot back, so I'm in my length of a stance already, and then I'm going to lower down and stand up. And I'm going to lower down as deep as I feel comfortable, maintaining good control all the way to the floor or to a range that I can control and come out of. So there's 2 or 3 variations there. We have our front, we have our back, we have our standing. All of those variations can be done loaded or unloaded in the goblet or the front rack. It's a personal preference on where you want to load that or if you don't want to load it. I'll also have some different options for you guys for the lunge. If you're not a lunger and you like to work on some single leg stuff but not lunge, I'll have some stuff there in the workout description, so check that out. But make sure, regardless of how we do our lunge, if it's forward, back, or standing, those key points are there. Lead knee is over top of the heel, back knee is under the hip, under the shoulder, and we're as vertical in torso as we can be, not slouching over our front leg. From there, we have our Renegade Row. I know it's everyone's favorite movement, but we're gonna rock the Renegade Row today for our pull, for our upper body pull. So we are going to position ourselves over top of our dumbbell. My feet are going to go to a squat to straddle stance. I am going to push the floor away. I'm going to lean to one side, pushing through that arm, taking hold of the dumbbell and pulling to my rib. I'll put it down, shift, push through that arm, pull to the rib, and I'll go back and forth until I've done 16 reps. Now, if you're looking at that going, I am not comfortable doing that with a load yet, that's fine. We can do it unloaded, and we can work on just the position and the posture that we need for the Renegade Row. So we set up in the same position. Feet are still in the straddle or squat stance. I just don't have a dumbbell underneath. I'm going to shift, pull one hand to my hip, keeping my elbow tight, hold for a beat or 2, shift, pull to the hip, and all the while, I'm trying to keep my shoulders and my hips square to the floor. I'm not trying to open up. I'm trying to stay as square as I can as I pull to that hip. So take your time there. Again, the little pause is going to substitute for having a load so we can get used to being in that position without any external loading. From our Renegade Row, we have our Dumbbell Snatch, which we covered pretty heavily in our previous portion of our warm-up. So if you need any points of performance there, please do so. The only difference here in the workout is that we are going to alternate reps, so 10 total count, and there isn't a 5-second hold overhead. That's just enough to show that you have control, and then you'll bring the dumbbell down. So make sure you stand fully with those legs, with a good overhead position before we bring the dumbbell back down to do the next rep. Now our last exercise is the V-up, and we have many variations for you for the V-up. First variation or first movement is the full V-up. So we have a double leg and a single leg. Now we get that body nice and long. Both upper and lower body will move together, meeting at the hip. So we can do a single or a double. Now our next variation is the tuck up. Very similar motion, except my knees are bent. So I pull myself up, I come back down, I can do a single, back and forth, meeting again at the hip. So we want to make sure the lower and the upper are moving together simultaneously to move at the hip. Now if you struggle moving both halves of the body at the same time, you can do this variation, which isn't as big of a hinge, but it'll still help you work on both halves of the body moving together, and that's the hollow up. So we reach long and tall, we pull the sternum and belly button together, lifting both hands, feet, lowering down, or we work a single leg, finding that same hollow position through those ribs. So if my hand was underneath your low back and you went into the hollow, I wouldn't be able to get my hand out because you're pressing down into it so hard that it's trapped between your back and the floor. So we don't want any space doing that hollow up when we're doing that movement. So if you can't get that low back down with 2 feet, use a single foot. Keep that in mind. The low back pressure in the floor is more important than whether or not you have 1 or 2 feet up in the air. Now, if you struggle with the V-up in terms of my legs, do all the work. My legs come up, but my upper body doesn't really come up very well. We have 2 variations. One of which, we have a nice L position on the floor, toes together, hands towards the shoelaces. I'm going to pull my sternum and belly button together. I'm going to roll up my shins, trying to reach my toes. There's no momentum in that movement, and that's the laying toe touch. The other variation has a little bit of momentum. It's a little faster. My legs stay straight, my toes stay together, my hands will come overhead, and I'm going to sit up, using a little bit of momentum and reaching as far down my legs as I can. Now that might be just past my knees, might be my ankles, maybe I can reach past my toes. But I'm going to use as much range as I can and that I have as I do that pike sit-up. Right? And you might find that as you do this work set, by the last round you might be getting farther than when you started. So explore that range that you have, and that kind of builds over the course of the rounds. Now that's a great hamstring stretch, great core exercise. It's fast, it uses a lot of momentum. It's okay to use those arms for help because it's a fast, momentum-based exercise. Now, none of those V-up options are better or worse than each other. They're just a little different, and it's always good to experiment with all of them throughout these different workouts that we do. So pick the variation you want to work today, hit it hard, get the most out of it that you can, and then maybe try a different one next time. So as a quick recap, we have 5 rounds of work, 10 alternating front rack lunges or one of those lunge variations, 16 alternating Renegade rows, dumbbell snatch for 10 alternating reps, and 16 V-ups. Now again, you can have different loading for all 3 of those loaded exercises if you have access to that, or you can work on that double dumbbell for the front lunge if you like, and a single for the other 2. So you can kind of mix and match and explore this work set and have some fun with that. So great chance to work on some skill, great chance to kind of push the pace a little bit here and see where you're looking at loading. But all in all, it's going to be a great day, and a very happy birthday to you, Sarah B. I hope you have a fantastic fantastic day today and you celebrate it a little extra special with this bad boy here. Now, as always, have a fantastic day, work for quality, and we'll see you tomorrow with another birthday celebration coming our way. Bye, you guys.